You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
All right, stop.
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
Hockey Talk on the Rock. Here we go. From Salt Spring Island, I'm Keith. This is Laura. We're going to talk some hockey things. It's Friday, March the 26th, all day long. And this time I'm going to throw a curveball right away at you, Laura. Instead of throwing to you for your big Canucks intro rant, I want to quickly impose three things on you before you get on your rant to just throw you off your game a little bit.
Okay, I like it.
The first thing I want to quickly ask you is, who do you think is the worser value signing from the offseason so far this year based on money and results? Would it be Evgeny Dadonov making $5 million on the Ottawa Senators, or Braden Holtby basically not playing for the Canucks at $4.1 million?
I mean, I feel like I'm biased in saying Holtby because Dadonov is at least playing. Like, he's on the ice. He's not a healthy scratch. And he's somewhat contributing. I know he hasn't been good. I think he has 11 points or something.
Yeah.
Which isn't great, but it's also Ottawa. Mind you, there are some players on Ottawa who are putting up decent amount of points. So I don't know if that's an excuse, but I feel just like for where the Canucks were at in terms of wanting to compete, I think Holtby's probably a worse value right now. But that being said, he could still, I mean, I don't really see him turning it around per se, but I think he could be better than what he has been. And maybe this week will be good for him. I don't know. Yeah, that's my answer. I'll say Holtby.
Okay. I think I agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to throw to you is something we'll hopefully expand on in a little bit, but with Buffalo setting kind of a price today in trading Eric Staal up to Montreal,
Yes.
do you think that it would be reasonable to suggest that if Brandon Sutter got traded at the deadline, that it would feasible to expect a return of a fourth round pick while Vancouver retains 50% of his salary?
Yes, I think that's feasible. I mean, Eric Staal is he's a weird one because while he's older than Brandon Sutter, he has scored 40 goals in the NHL, and it wasn't that long ago. So I feel like in some ways his value's going to be higher just based on that. And I know it's a buyer's market this season. So in years past, I would have maybe even suggested he could have gotten a second. But this year, definitely not. So I think a fourth, if they retain 50%, is pretty reasonable. I'd even maybe see a third, depending on the team.
Would you do it for a third or a fourth?
Like for the Canucks perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think Jim Benning's pride, based on what he paid to get Brandon Sutter, would get in the way of doing a trade like that in reality?
I mean, what he did to get Brandon Sutter was 5 years ago now?
I think so.
I feel like he can't care. If he does, then he shouldn't be a GM, which I know we've discussed a lot already, but that's just too unprofessional if he cared that much. I mean, players get moved for they get overpaid or underpaid for whatever their value is in terms of the price that the team gets back all the time. I mean, look at Buffalo with Ryan O'Reilly.
Right.
They got screwed basically in that deal, and it happens, right? The other way happens as well, where you overpay and afterwards you're like, okay, again, look at Nashville with Philip Forsberg and Washington. It's a prime example, but I think you can't be that upset about it. And he has been a serviceable third line center for the Canucks for the past 5 years when he's not injured, right?
Yeah.
Well, you've gotten your worth out of him. He's no longer young. You can't say you're building around him. I think there's like a 0% chance he comes back next year. You basically have to move on from him.
Yeah, I agree. I can see Eric Staal being Montreal's Jason Spezza, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. That was my note about it. I was like, Montreal is become like their bottom six is starting to look a lot like Toronto's.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking exactly that.
And then my third thing I want to quickly postulate to you is there's a lot of, trade talk, obviously, at this time of year for buyers and sellers. And being a Flyers fan and a Canucks fan, it's fun to speculate. And for whatever reason, I don't really agree or like it, but Nate Schmidt's name has come up in the rumor mill, obviously.
Yeah.
Elliot Friedman was talking about him. And the talk, I guess, is what they're trying to say is like, maybe he just doesn't fit into their system or whatever. So I don't think they should trade him, and I would be disappointed if they did. But if they did, could you see them doing a type of move where Philadelphia is looking to improve their defense? Do you think you could see them swapping for like Goss Despair and a low pick to take on the same length of contract, save almost $2 million each year on that for a guy 2 years younger?
Does that? It's a really bad deal for Vancouver.
Okay, it would have to be a higher round pick.
I think so, because I think Nate Schmidt is a better defenseman than Goss Despair. And I get what you're saying. They'll save some salary, but Vancouver, like, how do I put this? Their defensive problems are not about putting the puck in the net. In fact, this year they have, I think, one of the top scoring from the blue line. And I know part of that is because Tyler Myers has put in quite a few points. But defensively, that's where they need their help. And I think Nate Schmidt defensively is a better defenseman than Goss Despair. So yeah, if it was a higher pick, like a second, then I'd be like, okay, maybe. But I mean, keep in mind the Canucks gave up a second to get him, right? So they got to recoup exactly what. Yeah.
They gave up a third to get him.
Sorry. Yeah.
So yeah, I think if it was Gosper in a second, I think you'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
But anyways, those are the three things I want to try and throw past you right off the bat before you got on your big thing. So the Canucks played 2 games since we talked last Sunday.
Very uneventful games, yeah.
Yeah, take off. I got a few thoughts, but I definitely want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so the really frustrating part that I found about these past 2 games was both times you knew before the game started that Calgary had lost to Ottawa. And I feel like that should have been some motivation as the team to be like, okay, we can really get back in this race, like especially with Calgary. Forget about Montreal for 2 seconds. I have thoughts about them, particularly after the trade, for later. But like, if you're just focusing on Calgary and you are saying you want to like fight for a playoff spot and you know they've lost those 2 games, okay, you should go and you should put your best foot forward and you should find that motivation. Now, I totally understand in terms of their center depth right now, they basically have none. That first game, Horvat got hurt, he left, and you're left with basically no centers that you started with. He played the second game, probably wasn't feeling good. I don't think he played a particularly great game that second game. He had some noticeable like bad plays with the puck that aren't like normal for him. So I get it. Like injuries happen and all that. But the Canucks right now at center are lacking a lot. All that being said, it's just for me the frustration comes from the effort. Like it didn't look like, and I understand Winnipeg is a tough defensive team. They're hard to get chances against, but it's that you played them back to back and you kind of ran into the same problem 2 games in a row.
Right.
So that's really all I have. And after those 2 games, I'm like, okay, you gave it your best shot. You couldn't make up any ground. Montreal got all their games canceled, which also doesn't help the Canucks because part of what this whole break, like, people were looking forward to was kind of being like, okay, after this, we can see exactly where we are. Are we totally out of it? Or are we still somewhat in it? But now that Montreal's had those games canceled, they're not going to know.
Right.
And yeah, you missed a big opportunity to make ground on Calgary, basically. So all that being said, I think now you have to go into it like your seller. I think you have to listen on Sutter, on Ben, and on Pearson. But I don't know what the market is like for Pearson right now because of the injury, right? And I mean, you can even extend that a bit to Brandon Sutter, but at least he's been skating.
Well, I mean, there's gonna be a market more for centers. Like it seems like there's a lot of wingers available too.
Yeah.
If there is gonna be movement.
Well, it sounds like also, sorry, like Edmonton is meant to be in the market for like a third line center who can take face-offs and penalty kill, which to me sounds like Brandon Sutter. And I know like Glendening in Detroit is also on the market, and he'd be a cheaper, probably better option. So I'm gonna go out on a whim and say that he probably ends up in Edmonton. But you do have like the Alberta connection of the Sutters, and him ending up in Edmonton would be kind of funny. So, but
I think I'm gonna make the prediction that Sutter ends up in Pittsburgh.
I kind of felt that as well, and like familiarity with the players and organization. I know like obviously the GM is different now from when they made that trade, but like they like going back to their old organizations, and it happens quite often. So I feel like that's a good fit for him.
Yeah, and they need centerman right now too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the Vancouver Canucks a little bit of slack in those two games against Winnipeg because they are pretty banged up just overall. Like the defense, I guess, is pretty healthy.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say that Jordy Ben, I think, might surprise on what I think he's gonna get traded because he has some value because he's actually looked pretty good. Not for the beginning of the season after he came in late from the quarantine or whatever, but
he's looked good since. I agree.
And he's actually shown a little bit of like offensive skill. Like he's kind of been noticeable here and there, which has been surprising. So I think other teams will probably look at that and go for a depth defenseman that's playing well this year. He's probably worth paying a little more for a run. So he's an expiring contract. He's cheap. I think he'll get, I could see what do you think? A third?
I think a third for Ben would be fair.
I could see it.
Yeah. Again, with this draft too, like if you're talking about the 2021 draft, I think those third round picks are going to be worth it, like to have, right? If you can accumulate a bunch of those picks, then you never know. It's literally a lottery, and this year it's like more than more than that, right? So as many tickets as you get is a good thing. So I think there's going to be a lot of hidden gems, and I've said this before. So third, fourth round picks, like if you can stockpile them.
Yeah. I have to say that like I thought Jimmy has been okay.
He's been noticeable. He had those two good chances in the second game that Hellebuck stopped. And in general, I think with Miller, he's been a pretty good fit. But it would be nice to see him, put the puck in the net. I know he's only played 3 games or something for Vancouver, but he's had the opportunity or pick up a point or something, right?
Mm-hmm. So I mean, Jake DeBrusk is on the trade board, and I feel like if he's out there, it would be worth it to me to see Benning package a pick with Vertanen to get Jake DeBrusk, because I feel like that's a fair swap in the sense that I think DeBrusk has proven himself a little bit more so far, and I think he has a bit of a higher ceiling.
Yeah, I think I would like it, obviously, if Jake DeBrusk came to Vancouver, especially if it involves Vertanen. I think the question would be what pick gets it done to bring him in, or if it's a prospect, or, who it is, because he has had a bad year. It's undeniable for Boston. And I mean, if he came to Vancouver, especially right now, he's going to be given a bigger opportunity. So you would expect him. I mean, he's already had a pretty big opportunity in Boston. I'm not sure exactly what his playing time's like right now, but he was on the second line, right? So it's not like he wasn't given anything, but they need people who can who can produce offense, right? As a team. It's very apparent right now. Those last 2 games for me, it was like, okay, we really miss Elias Pettersson. Like,
Yeah. But in a way, this is a good opportunity for them to have a good look at who can start playing the bottom 6 for them more effectively, because they was obviously pretty atrocious last year and they didn't change it up much, which we've covered a lot of.
yeah,
But on that note, like they claimed another Leaf this week off waivers in Travis Boyd,
yeah,
and I kind of like it too because he's another expiring contract, cheap contract, bottom 6 guy. And with all the injuries, I'm thinking he's probably going to get a good look.
yeah,
And at this point, with the way that the spending is and the flat cap, the Canucks might actually be able to look at a couple guys like VC and Boyd and stuff like that, maybe able to get them to come back on a similar 1-year deal they're on now that are cheap.
yeah.
And if they could do that, I can actually see the Canucks maybe doing something, try to be crafty, or I could see myself if I was the GM being like, maybe it is worth paying a 2nd-round pick to trade Beagle to Seattle as their pick, and that clears that space, and then maybe buy out Roussel, something like that, and then if you get these other guys for 2 guys for the cost of 1 Beagle or something like that, it's probably going to be worth it in the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, it depends on a couple things. It depends on, first of all, if Benning is that smart, but then also kind of bringing back to what you talked about earlier, if he's willing to admit that he's made these mistakes.
Right.
If he trades out Beagle, I mean, that contract's awful, right? Like, that's the one for me this year that's really stood out. I'm like, why are you paying him that money? Like,
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. But anyway, if you could get out of that contract, I mean, even if you could find someone like a Seattle to take half the money, it would be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like the Travis Boyd pickup. I've heard that defensively he's not great, which does kind of freak me out for the bottom 6, but I'll wait and I'll make that observation for myself as well. So, I mean, we'll see, like with VC, with Boyd, as you say, if they come in and they show they can play in those roles in the bottom 6 and they stick around for another year, I'd be happy because, as you say, if the Canucks can figure out their bottom 6 moving forward, then their whole outlook of the team changes, right? It's the thing that's plagued this team for the last 3 years at least.
Yeah.
And they need to figure it out, and I think Jim's kind of coming around to that. And I mean, last year, like, you saw him trade Schaller, for instance, to get to Foley. It was in that deal, and so that was one of those guys where you're like, okay, he's admitting kind of that he might have made a mistake bringing that player in.
Right.
But yeah, the other thing for me with all the injuries, and this is old news, but like, if you kept Sven Berchi on your taxi squad and you put him in the lineup right now, for me, like, I think Michaelis, who didn't play the last couple games because you have VC now or whatever, so it's kind of going back in time, but like, you have Howerluck, you have McEwen, you have all those guys, but if you want someone who can score and has shown like chemistry specifically with Horvat, you do have that player there that you are paying like what, 3.5?
Yeah.
Something. And if you're just like, no, I'm never gonna look at you again, to me it's weird. I still think that's weird. But
It's got to be something from Travis, right?
yeah, I guess so, right?
You have to think that Travis is like
I won't
just hates him,
Yeah.
to the point that no matter like how else would that situation occur where a player like you say with skill would just not come back?
Yeah. And I mean, like, that's basically an unmovable contract, right? Like, no one's gonna take that money right now. And I think when he signed it, like, it was okay because he was scoring, but even then, it was kind of a head scratcher for me at least. So that's my bringing up Sven Berchi part of this conversation.
Because this is the last year of his deal, though, isn't it?
This is, and then also in the summer, to add to all the stuff we talked about, they can buy out Erickson and they'll save $2 million on their cap for the next 2 years. I mean, the alternative is you just keep him like you have for this year, and then after next year you're free of him.
Yeah.
Either way, that's gonna get better for sure. Like the cap, as long as he doesn't spend it. But right now, with it being this whole COVID flat cap, might actually be a blessing for Jim Benning because it's driving the price down on free agents.
It's true, and I think he might be able to get decent bridge deals out of the big guys just to get through this for a couple of years too, which might help turn over the roster appropriately.
Yes.
Hopefully.
But do you want to do the winners and participant ribbons for Eric Staal?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So my winner being Montreal. And I have it for a few reasons. The first is that they get the actual players, so it's easy, right now. But also they have a bunch of third round picks this year and a bunch of seconds. So for them to give up a third, it's not that big a deal. It really shores up their centers. I do wonder a bit about the speed on their bottom six now. Like, they have quite a few older players, Perry and now Staal, and then even Toffoli isn't that fast. So that's my only thing about Montreal that I kind of worry about, but I think in general they've upgraded their team through this trade without having to give up too much. And then Buffalo also retained salary, so they didn't have to trade salary out to bring in Staal. So I think in that way it's also kind of a win for Montreal. But yeah, I mean, Buffalo, they get their picks, but then as I said to you, I know they're missing a bunch of European scouts. So, it's nice to have picks, but maybe hire some scouts so that you can scout these players before they're drafted.
They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, Buffalo. They've only lost 16 in a row.
Oh, God. It's just a tire fire.
So I feel like I would give my participant ribbon to Buffalo based on losing 16 in a row and nothing else, but they're going to get it because I feel like a third and a fifth is not going to help them.
No.
Yeah. Like you say, they're lottery tickets, so they might help them, but it's not much for Montreal to pay. Like you say, Montreal had a surplus of thirds, fifth, whatever. Could be good, maybe. You never know. Eric Staal could be their Jason Spezza, like we talked about. And, I like it. It's depth, and he could probably step into a third. Like, I think he was like a second line center in Buffalo. So
and I mean, when he was in Minnesota, he produced quite well.
He did.
A bad player, so I think for him it really depends on the fit. The other thing about Montreal is that it sounds like they're going to get Cole Caulfield really soon too. So if you think about that, both those moves, I mean, I have no idea if he's ready for the NHL, but if he is, those two moves are going to be a big upgrade for their forward group.
Right.
So it's just something to keep an eye on, particularly because they're in that fourth spot and they're kind of fighting with Vancouver right now. I mean, again, I think after losing those two games, I think there's zero hope, but you never know. So anyway, I think for Montreal, it was good to add some depth at the deadline here.
Yep. Winner, Montreal.
Yeah.
We're junk.
The other, I guess, NHL news this week was the whole Tim Peel shebang, where he was caught with his microphone on saying that he wanted to give Nashville a penalty at the beginning of the third to even it up, which is not shocking because I think everyone knows that that's what the refs do. And
it was never said. Like, everyone knew it happened, but it was just never actually vocalized.
And if you look at that video, the thing that I find really funny is the Nashville bench is right there, and Duchesne's there, and they can all hear him, right? Obviously, it's on the mic, and no one reacts.
Right.
For Buffalo, so it's they all know.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like for Tim Peel, it kind of sucks because I know he was meant to retire like in April anyway. But the NHL, and this is something that I've had a pet peeve about for ages. Basically, I mean, it was before Vancouver lost to Boston, but that really amplified it for me. Where they love to call like two different rule books, one's in the playoffs and one's in the regular season.
Yeah.
And to me, like consistency matters because if I was an NHL GM and I knew that in the playoffs, hey, you don't call that many penalties, well, then maybe the design for my team is that I'm going to have like a group of people that like to push the limit that probably take too many penalties in the regular season. And I know I'm not going to get those calls in the off season. Okay, I want to have a decent penalty kill so I can get to the off season, but by not calling calls in the playoffs, this is kind of a different topic, but it's all connected. You're basically handing the favor or whatever of the series over to the team that probably has the worst power play and probably, their special teams aren't that good because you're taking that out of the equation. So saying you don't want to manage a game is basically managing a game on its own.
Right.
So back to Tim Peel, like I feel like it's literally right. It's just because he got caught and they had to do something, but we all know that all the refs do it. And now the thing is, every time you watch a hockey game, you're gonna be like, okay, is that a real penalty or is that a makeup call? Like that's what I caught myself doing in the Winnipeg game. Mind you, like 3 of those penalties were too many men on the ice, so that was fun. But I feel like that's gonna be the theme for the rest of the season now.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but I think in the future, and I've advocated for a long time, like the hot mics are going to be more involved in the game and stuff like that. So they just need to clean that type of stuff up.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's probably been half a decade where I've been like, I would pay the extra $60 a year or whatever on my subscription to be able to hear what the players are saying and the refs are saying and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
But they would have to get this stuff out before they can get there, right? Like you could think it, like, I'm gonna make a makeup call, Nashville, those fuckers, but
yeah,
you can't say it,
No.
So if they're able to get us to that point and understand, and everyone gets to that point, I think if from an entertainment value aspect, they might move that way. But in the interim, they've got a long way to go, obviously, because people, especially in this day and age, are super overreactionary to everything.
Yeah.
So, anyways, unfortunate. It's too bad he didn't get the last month of his career in.
Yeah, it's too bad. Oh well. I just hope, I hope that it doesn't overtake it, like the rest of the season for controversy stuff. But I'm gonna throw it over to you for a little bit here to talk about your Flyers and how they can't play against New York.
So disappointing and so frustrating because like I hate the Rangers so much. They're the worst, but they're playing really good now. It seems like since their coaches got COVID and like the AHL coach came up for that one game, their offense has just been flying. And the Flyers are like, I don't know, at the beginning of the year they were playing awesome. And they are just slumping away. And the goalies are playing awful. And the defense is bad. I think I mentioned it before that like Matt Niskanen retired abruptly after the bubble.
Yeah.
And it really threw them off. And like I think it's almost relatable to like Chris Tanev leaving and its effect on Quinn Hughes with Ivan Provorov. But I think with just the overall defense core, because he played on the penalty kill and the power play too.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the year, when it was still the silly season, I think Eric Gustafsson looked like he was going to be that guy to fill that role.
Yeah.
But I think as the year went on and everybody got comfortable playing because there was no preseason and all that nonsense, he kind of got exposed defensively. And that's kind of like where Niskanen was the better player. He was way more of a defensive guy. Like he was so good in that way. So I think it's just kind of caught up to them a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think they have so much firepower up front that they were able to just kind of outscore their way through the games in the early year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really frustrating, and I'm surprised they haven't done anything yet. And that's kind of why I brought up the random Nate Schmidt rumors
Yeah.
maybe earlier, because he would be a player that they would be looking for sure. But as I mentioned before, with the expansion draft, they they'd probably be smarter to look for a rental at this point. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to say.
I mean, they are in by far the toughest division, which is the other part of it too, right? And we talked
Yeah, and I mean Boston's playing higher than I thought they would be playing this year, and same with Washington, and same with Pittsburgh. I
yeah.
kind of expected the Islanders to be up there, but yeah, when everyone else elevates to the play, you gotta do it too. And I don't know. There's talk about Scott Lawton getting traded out of town, and I don't like that because he's a good little player in the
Yeah.
role he plays. It's good. Something's gonna give. Like, how many is that kid, Manson kid in Anaheim? Is he one of the defense that's on the last year of his deal?
I can't remember if he's got another year. He might. I know that they've been rumored to like move on from him.
So him, or I think more confidently that Savard guy in Columbus.
Savard would be
He's
a
on the
good.
last year of his deal.
Yeah.
So I really feel like behind the scenes, if I were Fletcher, those would probably be the two guys I'd be looking hardest at because they need what those guys bring right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that position seems to be harder and harder to fill, right? Like in terms of young defensemen, there seem to be more that have that like offensive style of the game, which is kind of like the new age defenseman. And it seems to be harder to find the guys that can shut players down. That's something that I've kind of noticed across the league. Or maybe it's that those guys take longer to develop into that style of player.
Yeah.
But because yeah, for me when I watch the Canucks, that's the thing that I noticed the most. I think is like, okay, you don't have that guy. And they have players that have kind of filled the role, but yeah, I can see with Philly like thinking about their decor, them needing someone like that as well. But
Yeah, it's just like it's such a weird year and the expansion draft and all this stuff, right? So it's uh,
yeah, I mean,
they're
the
in a tough
good
spot.
news is that, and I think we both wanted to mention this, but yeah, the federal government has said they're going to reduce the number of quarantine days for players coming into Canada from 14 to 7, which means that hopefully there will be some deals on deadline day
Yeah,
because it kind of seems like it could be one of those years, even though there's lots of rumors and lots of like teams that are looking for something specific. It does seem like it could be a year where literally nothing happens because of all the circumstances you're talking about, the expansion draft, the flat cap, all that stuff. And then the quarantine was added to it for the Canadian teams. But hopefully that kind of ups the talk, and we saw that trade between Montreal and Buffalo today, and evidently Eric Staal was going to say no. He had a no trade, right? Or a modified no trade. And originally he was going to say no to Montreal when it was the 2-week quarantine. But then when they reduced it to one, he was like, okay.
oh really?
Yeah. So I think it will make a difference for both teams and players.
It's interesting.
Maybe for the Canucks is a disadvantage because, you know, if there was that 2-week quarantine and you're looking at like Brandon Sutter, for example, well, then teams that might be looking for that center depth are going to be like, okay, we're going to call Vancouver because we're going to get them faster.
Right.
Now, the 1-week thing, I believe, because I know Travis Boyd is quarantining, like they have to do that anyway
Yeah.
in Canada, so it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. But yeah.
I had one more thought, but then I lost it during that last round. So
Okay, sorry.
that's okay. So the Canucks don't play again until Wednesday, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's Wednesday, the 31st, which is also when Montreal plays again after they had a COVID outbreak with, well, 2 players tested positive for COVID after they played Vancouver, and one of them has been tested for the variant, which
Right.
I think is why they were so severe with saying you're not playing for like a week and a half or whatever it will be, just to be really sure that it's not spreading around that locker room. And I mean, the Canucks were pretty lucky, I think, that they didn't get anyone like, or there was no transmission. So, knock on wood. But yeah,
Yeah, regaining my thought
sorry.
on the deadline. No, it's all good. I think we might not. I think we'll still see at least 10 deals on deadline day. But
Yeah,
I think between now and then, I feel like we'll probably see another 10. You know,
right.
I feel like there's gonna be more activity leading up to than normal because of all the weird circumstances. Kind of like starting with Staal today. I won't include that in one of my 10, but
Okay.
yeah, I think I can see it happening for sure. And the quarantine thing will, I think it'll make it, like you say, more likely. And I do see the possibility of some of the teams that are out of it, or maybe thinking they're out of it, trying to solve some of their expansion draft problems now too. So I
Yeah.
think that might add in the odd trade here and there.
Yeah. The other team I think that's really fascinating on exactly that front is Nashville, because there's been all the rumors about Ekholm, and then they kind of changed to Ellis recently. And like, Nashville's such an interesting team because they play in the division that they play in. And like, Chicago's been pretty, I know they won last night, but they haven't been good of late. Columbus is kind of meh as well. And one of those three teams is going to make the playoffs. It's either going to be Nashville, Columbus, or Chicago. And so if you're Nashville and you've got like at least four defensemen that you want to protect, it kind of makes sense to move on from one of those defensemen now. But then
Right.
if you foil and you also think like, hey, maybe we can make the playoffs and then get destroyed by Tampa Bay, but let's just say, you know, like, I mean, honestly, all three of those matchups against Tampa would be interesting for obvious reasons, I think. But I don't think it's going to be a tough series for them. Maybe if, no. But like, I just think it's interesting to watch that team and see what they do, because they're not out of it, even though they've played really poorly. But they won last night as well, so it's probably not the best time to say it. But they do have offense, they have good defense as well on that team, so who knows?
We'll see. I mean, they don't have to. It's not like any of the guys that they're rumored to be trading away are on expiring contracts. It's all guys that are like with terms. So it's not like they really need to make that decision with risk of losing them for nothing or anything like that.
Well, the only problem for them would be the expansion draft, right? Because it's like you protect three defensemen and six forwards or whatever, or 4D, or like 8 players total or something.
Yeah, 7-3 or 4-4.
Yeah. And so Nashville's 100% going to want to protect 4 defensemen if they keep everyone right now.
Right.
So then you risk losing one of your forwards. You probably don't want to risk losing. So that's the reason why I'd see them moving from one of those D-men that has term.
Yeah.
But then they're going to have to get quite a lot back, right? Like, they're asking for basically what Toronto got for Jake Muzzin, evidently for Ekholm.
Right. And that's fair.
That's fair. Makes sense. So we'll see. And then evidently, I'll throw in all my evidentlys in one now. Buffalo's asking for a first for Taylor Hall is the rumor.
Makes sense.
Which, yeah, it makes sense. And I think, I don't know if they get it this year again, just because of his contract. I assume they'll probably have to retain, which the Pagulas must be loving right now. They're going to have to retain like on all the players they move. But there's no way you can put that, like, unless Colorado, I know they have money, but then you're going to be asking for less, right? If they take all the money. So
I think they'd be able to get a first regardless, based on the whole, like, how many question marks in the first round of the draft anyways, due to the lack of games played and scouting.
yeah, no, that makes sense. We'll see there. And then I was going to say something else about trades. Who was it? I forget now. But yeah, the reason why I worked my Whalers / Carolina reverse retro is because that's where I was hoping Eric Staal would end up. I did want to see the reunion in
He'll
Carolina.
sign there next year.
Yeah, you think so?
Well, either he'll play really well in Montreal and like it and do the Spezza thing there,
Yeah.
or I can see him doing the Spezza thing back in Carolina through the twilight years.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if he went back there after spending his beginning of his career there and winning the cup there,
Mhm.
all that stuff. So that's what I was hoping for. So that's what I'm wearing. What I'm wearing.
I wore my Florida Luongo jersey for two different reasons, and one was I've been having trouble keeping track of which ones I've been wearing, so now I'm just going through in a rotation.
Oh yeah.
And the second one is because I thought they were still number one, but they're not anymore. It was only like I think it was like last week they were like top team in the league.
They
which
were, yeah, it's crazy.
surprised the hell out of me based on their team and what I thought they were going to be going into the year. So
Yeah, no, that was
throw them a small amount of love for how well they're doing this year.
yeah, it'll be very interesting to see if they can keep it up. Like, they have some good players, and I feel like I'm really skeptical about Florida because for the past like 5 years, every year I've thought they should be better than what they are. And then this year I was like, yeah, no, they're just gonna disappoint again. There's no way. And then they come out and they play really well, which is nice for them to see. I mean, they haven't won a playoff round since '99,
Right.
which is pretty sad. So it would be cool to see. Like, I mean, I honestly don't care about hockey in Florida for obvious reasons, but it would be cool to see if they won a round. I'd be happy for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're as good a team as Tampa, and I think Carolina is also better than them, but I'm not sure about their goaltending, which is always the thing with Carolina. So
Well, Carolina's got this Nedeljkovic or
yeah,
whatever
he's been
who's
playing really
playing
well.
real well. And I'm glad you brought up goaltending because my final note is Bobrovsky has been playing well enough to take the goal back, it seems, in Florida. So
Yeah.
do you think you can see Florida trading Drieger before this deadline because of the expansion draft?
I think he gets moved, and I did write down where I thought he was gonna get traded to, and I thought I was real. Oh, I put San Jose
Oh, yeah.
because I think San Jose needs to figure out their goaltending again for obvious reasons, and he seems like he would work in the sense that he's played for Florida, and Florida defensively, especially last year, wasn't that good. And so I think possibly in San Jose he'd be a decent fit and he'll be an upgrade on their two goalies that they have now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my bet with him. But I think he gets moved because there's no way they're gonna expose him in the draft. I mean, maybe they do, and then that's the player you lose if
Right.
you're fine keeping Bobrovsky because I think
I think they have to keep Bobrovsky for the no movement clause.
yeah. And I mean, they're not going to take him at 10.5 or whatever it is he's making, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. So, yeah, I mean, you look at it one or two ways. Either you keep your roster players and then you upgrade your backup goalie and you lose him for nothing. But goalies in general usually don't get back what you think they're going to get when they're traded. So,
Mm-hmm. They might be able to get something a little more if they take Dubnik's 4 point whatever for the rest of the year and and a pick.
And my other thought is with Edmonton because they're basically at the cap and they have the really bad Neil contract. And I think now, if you look like at the Neil Lucic trade, I would say that Calgary won that deal, even though like Lucic was awful in Edmonton. I think in Calgary he's found kind of a home where he's not great, but he does stuff. Whereas Neil is basically Louis Eriksson, but a little bit more engaged. Like he gets an odd point here or there. But because they're at the cap and they want to buy, like I'm assuming they want to buy, and in the kind of reunion tour of my thoughts, I was like, okay, how could they get Taylor Hall? Like if they brought in Hall to Edmonton back again. And I wondered if they could get Buffalo to take on Neil's contract if they gave them something more.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Isn't how many years has he got left?
I think 2.
Yeah, I don't know.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it would have to be like something pretty good. But I mean, even if you think like maybe like Pugliarvi,
Nah,
no, you don't think so?
no. I think you keep him at this point.
But you get rid of that contract. I don't know. I think it's something to watch if they could manage that one. But I think Hall ends up. My prediction with him is I think he ends up on the island. I think he goes to the Islanders.
Yeah, I can see that.
Really.
I can also see Florida trying to do something.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's everything I have. My
Oh,
bad.
I got you. That was a good trade center speculation type episode again. Since
Yeah.
Canucks gave us very little, but we'll do it again next week and
Maybe
hopefully
there'll be some
more
Canucks moves
games.
in there.
Yeah, because the Canucks only have played either 1/2 games by the time we next talk, so we'll just have to rely on our ability to ramble on about other hockey news and hope for the best.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, well, this has been another episode of good old Hockey Talk on the Rock.
Woohoo!
It's Laura, I'm Keith, and thanks for listening if you did, and we'll tune in next week.